Hi guys, it's Carl here. So if you're new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe and keep in touch with the videos I'm uploading. So in the last video I was talking about empathy, but specifically from the perspective of a person whose family dynamic is very destructive, maybe the situation is very toxic, and that person chose to estrange to create some kind of safety and psychological distance away from all this toxicity. But then that empathy is getting in there, it's compromising that safety because they still feel a pull back to go in and make sure that family members are okay. But this prompts a question around toxicity within families and what makes a family so toxic and so destructive. And families, they become estranged for a whole wide range of reasons. Often abusive behaviours is one, but it isn't just that. Sometimes it's just really massive personality differences and differences in outlooks in life and fundamental differences around beliefs, maybe around religion, around finances, around relationships, and those differences, they can't bridge those gaps. And because there's such a difference, it can be very stressful being around people because there's so much conflict because they can't agree. It could also be because of expectations of each other, and we set different standards for each other in families, and often there's a hierarchy, or maybe some people are expected to behave one way and others are expected to behave other ways, and that again creates a lot of stress within families because of the unfairness around the situation. But then as a therapist, my job is to look much deeper, look past all these relational factors and all these expectations and all the abusive behaviours, and trying to find what sits underneath all of it. And I can't help but wonder, is really fundamentally down to a lack of emotional understanding between family members in a family, or a lack of empathy really between each other. But then the question is, where does empathy come from, and why do some family members have more empathy than others? I wonder, is empathy something that's taught? So if we had one primary or multiple primary caregivers who are very empathetic, is that something that's taught to us? Do we internalize the experiences with those people? Maybe they empathize with how we're feeling, maybe they're very sensitive to our worries and our fears and our emotions, and then we learn to be passed it on to other people in the family. But what I find interesting, some of my clients would come from big families. There could be a good few brothers and sisters, and they all had the same primary caregiver, but their empathy levels are different. Not everyone is as empathetic as others. So it really highlights that it is complex, that attachment with a caregiver, and when you were born could be different sibling order, that might be a factor. There could be other complex factors. There could be other things happening with the parents' lives which affect an ability to attach with that person, which then maybe you don't experience the same level of empathy as somebody else, maybe your brothers or sisters within the family. But then, is empathy something else? Is it gender specific? Now the reason I say that is because there's research that suggests that women are more empathetic than men. And just anecdotally from my own experience, I haven't seen that. I've seen my clients, they struggle with their mothers, they struggle with their sisters, they struggle with their daughters just as much as they might be struggling with their fathers and their brothers and their adult children, adult sons. So I haven't experienced that, but again, research suggests that there may be something there as well. But then, is empathy the product of emotional maturity? Is it something that we develop in our own way at our own time? And maybe some people develop empathy much later in life, and it could be correlate with life experience, and maybe different people in their life that might emphasize or highlight the different life decisions that they made, and prompt them to start to reflect on their life and develop a heightened level of awareness around their choices and around the impact that their choices may have had. And that sense of generativity, when you look back at life and think, well, look, these are the mistakes that I made, and that may prompt someone to develop a heightened level of empathy towards other people in the family. And I've seen this sometimes with my clients. They may have reconciled with their parents as their parents are much older, and maybe their parents reached a point where they were much more open to the suffering of their adult children. Maybe they're much more open to the struggles that the impact they may have had on them emotionally, and they weren't aware of it at the time. But it isn't just parents. Again, it could be siblings. As they get much older, maybe they reconcile. They come from a different place. Their life experiences are different, but not always. That's not always the case. But sometimes they do reconcile. But then, is empathy inherent? Is it something that's passed in our genes? And again, there is research to suggest that some people are more genetically predisposed to a higher level of empathy than others. But again, it's complex, and there could be other environmental factors that at play, or it could be all of these things. Maybe it is a product of our caregiver, coupled with a generic inheritance, coupled with gender, coupled with a level of maturity and reflection that maybe others in the family don't have. But another aspect I see of empathy is how it's very context specific, and some people, they need to have experienced something personally before they can empathize with another person going through that same experience. And I was chatting to someone recently who was telling me that he was estranged from his brother from when they were about teenagers, and he described himself, the person I was talking to said he really struggled with teenage life, and he reacted out a lot. His behaviours were very rebellious, he was very difficult. Now in reflection he looks back and he could see that he was actually struggling with chronic anxiety, but it was never identified, it was never diagnosed, and so it went undiagnosed and he was just constantly acting out. But his brother couldn't empathise, I couldn't understand why he was behaving the way he was. He was just seeing really difficult behaviours and maybe a lot of high conflict between them. So they became estranged for many years. And it wasn't until much later on when the brother, he had his own son and he got to teenage life, and he started to demonstrate a lot of the same behaviours that his brother was when he was a teenager. And then he could start to join the dots and he could understand, well, look, this might, maybe his brother was actually really struggling in the same way that his son was struggling. So they end up reconnecting, the two brothers. And the other brother had much more respect for the teenage brother, the brother who was acting out and behaving in such a way. And he actually reached out to him for help, because the person I was chatting to, he really, he did a lot of work on himself, and he really learned to ground his emotions, and he became a very well balanced, very mature person, great with relationships, and just really just a really good guy. And the brother started to respect that, and he could see that positive influence might help him with his son, and they reconciled from a really good place, because he started to view his brother completely differently. He could empathise what he was going through, and he started to reach out to him for help. So, there is aspects around it. We need to understand what other people are going through, and not everybody can. But another factor which gets in the way of empathy is bias and projection, and that may block a person from empathising. And I see this often, where maybe if there's a big family, the rules are different for different people, or some different family members are treated differently. One of my clients, she struggled massively with her mother. Her mother really just was very harsh and very, very difficult, very strict. But she wasn't with her brothers, and she had a good few brothers, and she was the only daughter, and it seemed to be, we couldn't understand why she was treating her daughter so harshly, and yet the rules were different for her son. But again, that could be very much the fact that the mother, maybe she hadn't connected with her own pain, maybe she wasn't able to empathise with herself and how she struggled with life. Maybe she had a difficult relationship with her own mother, and it goes unresolved, and it just gets passed on, this multi-generational process where it just gets passed on to unfortunately my client, just purely because she was her daughter. Maybe the mother, she was reminded of herself when she's seeing her daughter, but she couldn't connect with that. And I mean, if I was working with the mother, that would be my job, is trying to help her connect with her own pain. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. A lot of people go through life avoiding feeling pain, and you can understand that the problem is that it just creates this legacy that gets passed on intergenerationally. And my client now, she really struggled with her own emotions and the pain that she was left with. She was very heavily traumatized by it, and it also prompted a question about her being a mother. She really dealt with her own ability to be a mother, which I felt very tragic, because this person is a lovely person, and I say she'd be an amazing mother, but she was just so worried that she would have a negative effect on her kids in the same way her mother had a negative effect on her. But it is complex. A lack of empathy within families leave a legacy which find it very difficult to resolve, and ultimately, I wish families came into the practice and I could work with the whole system, but often I'm really left to just work with the individual who makes that decision, come in, and working with them on an individual level. It's about helping them develop a level of compassion for themselves. It's a very difficult thing to do, because we internalise so much from family. If that harshness exists, the criticism, the judgments, we internalise it, and it becomes part of who we are. We judge ourselves, and we're very harsh on ourselves, and it's very hard to empathise with ourselves and how we struggle massively in our relationships. But it takes time, and even coming into therapy, and it doesn't have to be therapy, it could be someone in your life who isn't judgmental, who isn't harsh, and who are quite soft with you, and they accept you for who you are. Their expectations are very realistic, and they just that level of acceptance over time. That internal process of being harsh on yourself, it softens a little bit. You don't expect other people to be so judgmental, and all of a sudden you may start to internalise the softness, the level of acceptance, the level of reasonableness, the level of calm that we may get from other people. And relationships are critical to healing. Really, really important. And I think if you're someone who has chose to estrange, or even if estrangement is involuntary, maybe this has been forced on you, maybe your family have cut you out, it's about having the right people in your life now. You may shape your internal psychology a little bit differently, so you're not so hard on yourself, and you realize you're not your family, even though you're shaped by your family, and there is a strong invisible emotional field that connects you. There are other people in your life who will view you completely differently, and over time that process of differentiation, which I've mentioned it before, that emotional separation from family, it's not talking to your family. It's not means you don't ever speak to them again, but it just means that you're becoming much more of an individual, and you love yourself unconditionally away from family. And again, I'm conscious these are all buzzwords. They're very difficult to actually put into practice, but it is possible. But it's very much about learning to have a much softer relationship with yourself, and parts of that is changing the people around you and bringing in the right people who can see you for who you are. It's not easy, but it's tough work, it's life work, it's never ending. I'm always working on myself. It does get easier, and I found it easier now, but again, it's a constant process. Same with my clients, some are doing great, but they have to just keep working on themselves. But that's just life, and that's, we live in a world which is quite destructive sometimes. You will always cross paths with people who are very judgmental and very critical of us, and we just have to keep working on ourselves and managing our own triggers and making sure that we're grounding ourselves and we're living our own life and not constantly censoring ourselves around other people and their lack of empathy for us. So that's it, guys. Again, subscribe to the channel. Please give it a share if it might help someone you know, and I'll talk to you all very soon. And that's it. Take care. Bye bye.